During my first semester in college, back in July of 2021, I made a game that would later be called Lonely Turret. At the time, it was a quite small indie game consisting of one endless level. You defended against waves of enemies attacking your turret, and your only defense is to aim your weapons at them as you unlock more interesting attachments and upgrade them. You aren't the only one leveling up, though, because the enemies get stronger as the game goes on. As a game developer, I knew right away this game was really fun, and its only downside is, unless you're really playing it, it's hard to tell what's going on. I posted this version for free on itch and hoped it would gain some interest. During the following spring of 2022, I'd put together a more complex version of it and called the original demo. This version had tons of new weapons and enemies, but it also split the game into 5 different levels, each with their own endless modes. Each level now had bosses in them, and the way you beat it was getting to 1600 kills, where the last unique boss would be at around 1500. This is the first game I made that I was proud of, so I hope to get it onto Steam. I put it onto itch in February in hopes of making enough that I could put it on Steam, and it sold 4 copies. This is the scary reality of game development. You can work on something for so long, and it might just never get found, unless some big YouTuber plays it or the algorithm gods favor you. It's destined to just sit forever, not getting downloaded, lost on the internet. If this wasn't enough, I would soon find out that one of the levels had a game-breaking bug. Because of this, you couldn't even make it to the final level that I was so proud of. The final level brought back every attachment and enemy from the previous levels, even giving you 2 extra attachment slots through a new moon. If that wasn't bad enough, I couldn't even fix the level, so my SSD had corrupted soon after. Bodycards, my Minecraft mod, took a major hit from this as well, as I had been working on the Luminous and Xylex update for 1.18, and I had a good amount of progress that wasn't backed up yet, so I had to spend a lot of time remaking that, and it really hit my motivation. The fun got ripped away from working on my Minecraft mod, so it kind of burnt me out of all kinds of development for a while. I spent many weekends over half a year going back to polish the game, and it just broke. It couldn't even be played. It was really upsetting to find out about the bug. And so I made it free. I didn't want to ask for money for a game that was unfinished, and so it was. These past few weeks, I was thinking about this game a lot. I wanted to make a fun game for my portfolio that would hopefully gain some popularity, so I decided to make a sequel for this beloved creation of mine, and thought Devlog would be a great way to share it with the world and hopefully see some more traction when I release it. Lonely Turret 2's development started very slow. I would spend probably a whole week just working on the coloring system for assets and upgrading the sprites. But this last week I've been doing a lot of work on it, and it's really been coming together. To start with, I decided I would make level 1 in its entirety. I could balance it later, but I wanted to have everything finished for the level under the hood, so I can move on to level 2 without having to make any changes to the UI. I'll go into attachments in another devlog, but the biggest thing here were the enemies. The enemies came in pre-ordered waves that could change every few times you upgrade your turret, which would happen 4 to 25 kills depending on where you are in the game. The level 1 enemies are a circle, the rounder, a triangle, the dart, and a square, the swarmer. The rounder is pretty much balanced all around. As you meet different level rounders, they all seem to have normal speed, damage, and health for their levels. They can usually be taken down easily if you aim at them, but if you have other methods like homing weapons or tornadoes, they can be taken down quite easily. The dart, on the other hand, is a very fast enemy. They can really hurt in the long game, but in the beginning, they only deal a portion of the damage a same level rounder would do. And they are so weak that you can take 2 of them out with 1 bullet if they line up. Where the dart really shines is in the late game though, as they get even faster and are a great Achilles heel for some good cheesing strategies. Do you have tornadoes sucking up every enemy so that they can't even get close to you? Well, the darts are too fast to be sucked in. Do you have layers of orbiting bullets shielding you? Well, the dart's a little too fast, and at this point, it has enough health that it can make it through one or two bullets. The next enemy is the Swarmer. The Swarmer seems like the opposite of the dart. It goes very slow, and it's a bit of a tank. The Swarmer acts as a Trojan horse, though, slowly getting close and then exploding into smaller, faster swarmlings when they die. In the original, the best way to deal with these was a good wall or layer of orbiting bullets. But there are some new interesting ways to deal with them that I'll get into next video. Next up, let's look at some of the flaws of the original game and how I improved on them for this one. First up, a common issue was screen size. Now, in the original, it was a square screen, which means the options were 256, 512, and 1024. This was made to work well with the game, which automatically rendered on a 256 by 256 screen, using what I assume could have been 128 or 256 in graphics. Either way, it was not ideal. While they did allow for perfect rendering of the game, they just weren't good. They were terrible for recording videos, and this had to be changed. The new version extends the sides to make it 1920 by 1080, with the entire thing being scalable for different screen sizes. Next up is the upgrade menu. One of the biggest issues in the original was how complex this was. First, it would zoom you in so you could at least see your tower, and it would show an icon. Not even straightening out your tower. It'll show an icon with a dot where the 1 mark is, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 around. I'll show a graphic of it up now, but it was definitely not ideal. The new version, however, will use a different camera. That way your turret's always upright, and instead of that weird menu where you would have to first select your weapon and then click a key on the keyboard for it to attach, this one's much more interesting. Now all the new equipment you get are on the left side. Your permanent upgrades are on your right, so this is your stuff like your healing, and some new ones that I added as well. While in the middle, you can see all your current weapons and upgrades. The rolled attachments can now be dragged onto these 8 slots, and it'll equip themselves, either upgrading one of the same turret or replacing one that isn't. On the right side, you can see there's much more than just the heal button. Now, you can heal, you can increase your defense, or you can increase your rotation speed. All of these are done by dragging it onto the turret, so it's great, and it works very well for mobile, which I plan to eventually do. There's also the issue of upgrades in the late game of the original. As more attachments are added to the pool, and you get further into the level, your odds of getting the ones you need are much lower and lower. To negate this, the sequel adds wildcards. Pun intended. Whenever the attachment pool gets big enough, wildcards are added to the game that can upgrade any attachment. As you unlock more things in your pool, you get more of these, so the odds of getting them always stay pretty decent. And it's really helpful, because if you're at a point where you can't get an upgrade you need, you can use the wildcard to upgrade it. And if you get one and you don't really need it, you could play it on its own. It'll give you a random level 2 attachment, which is the equivalent of getting 2 upgrades instead of 1. Next up, I worked on the bosses, or a boss. The old boss from the first game, seen on all 5 levels, is now called the Hive, and it's the boss for the first level. Each level of the Hive spirals around the player while spawning batches of enemies to send at the player. Its speed, batches, and cooldown for how often it releases the batches varies on its level, but these bosses are much more interesting than they were before, both because of how all 10 versions of it are unique, and the boss bar. Let's be honest, it's much easier to look at a boss bar than just hoping that you're able to take it out. Old bosses spawn starting at kill 500, but in the new game they start at 250, since now there are 10 of them and not just 5. Which brings me to the other major change. In the original, both enemies and turret attachments only had 5 levels, but in the sequel, this has been doubled. With more levels, it makes more sense for enemies to change out faster and the player to have chances to upgrade, which brings me into another major change to the game: time. In the original, levels were long, really long. Usually you would need to beat 1600 enemies, which in turn means fighting all 5 levels of the boss. But on average, it would take 30 minutes to get this far, even making use of speed multipliers like the fast forward button in the pause menu. Now that isn't such a bad thing, but in my opinion, 30 minutes is a bit much when you consider how little the original game had. To keep this from getting stale, the 10 new levels mean now enemies will change twice as often, and you will upgrade twice as often, which adds a lot more strategy into the game. Lastly, there's the pause menu. The new pause menu is pretty simple. At the moment, it only has a restart option and a fast forward option, where you can toggle between normal speed and 2x speed. Overall, I'm pretty proud with it so far. This covers most of the progress I've made for Lonely Turret, and if you're interested in seeing more, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe, because it means you'll be more likely to see the next devlog when it comes out. I hope to get another one out sometime this next week covering all of the attachments so far. You might have seen some of the new ones in this video or mentioned in passing, but there are already so many that it'll need its own video. Take care, and see you later. This is Wild, signing off.